While it may be the black sheep of the Souls series, Sekiro is an absolutely phenomenal game with many awards to its name and boasting the greatest video game combat of all time. It holds such a consistent level of quality and rarely suffers the moments of immense suffering present in other Soulsborne games. That extends to the boss roster, which is a contender for FromSoft's best, so today I'm going to rank all of them from worst to best. This is my pick for the worst boss in Sekiro, and it's pretty widely regarded as such by the community. It's FromSoft's classic inability to handle ganks, and unlike fights such as Ornstein and Smoke, there's nothing altered about the boss to balance the multiple enemies. Thankfully, it isn't too difficult since the firecrackers make it much easier to whittle them down, but compared to the rest of Sekiro's amazing boss roster, this fight completely falls flat. I'm definitely going to get a lot of criticism for putting Owl this low, since it's a boss I know many people love. For me, there are just so many flaws in its design. The arena is clearly not made for this boss, since combined with his oversized sword, which I like to call the compensator, his attacks are nearly impossible to avoid. Of course, Sekiro already encourages facing attacks head on rather than dodging, but Owl deals far too much posture damage to fight him like you fight Genichiro or Fire Ishin in the same arena. The best strategy I've found is just to run around the arena in circles and wait for an opening, which is never an enjoyable way to fight a boss, especially not in Sekiro. His moveset is actually well designed, but it's the great shinobi's posture damage and size in comparison to the terrible arena that placed this boss near the bottom of the mediocre tier. The chimps are often stated to be the worst boss in Sekiro, which I strongly disagree with. There's no way the monkeys are worse than the ape duo. The puzzle isn't the easiest to figure out, but it's an incredibly creative approach to a puzzle boss, which From Software typically struggles with. The atmosphere is very strong, and while it's nowhere near Sekiro's consistent level of quality, I do appreciate the monkeys' existence. But every boss from here is decent or better, so when compared to the rest of the Souls games, it's clear Sekiro generally upholds a higher standard of boss design. This flatulent gorilla is the life of the party, if what you look for in a party is flying turds and poison clouds. Jokes aside, he's a decent boss, which surprisingly manages to provide Sekiro with a pretty engaging beast boss, a feat I really didn't expect it would be able to pull off. While I do think it's on the lower end of the game's boss quality, this flatulent monkey is nonetheless deserving of its spot in the upper echelon of the decent tier. I've decided to rank Inner Genichiro significantly lower than his original variant, despite this boss being superior mechanically. The reason for this is that the main appeal of the original Genichiro fight was that it was a challenging wall in the game, which forces the player to understand the combat and provides them the tools they need to beat the game. By the time you get to fighting Inner Genichiro, you will likely have mastered Sekiro's mechanics, and this fight will offer very little challenge as a result, making it a far less memorable fight than the rest of Genichiro's incarnations. Placing a fair bit lower than its true variant, the Corrupted Monk serves as an effective appetizer for the rematch preceding Fountainhead Palace. As with most bosses in Sekiro, her move pool is fantastically well considered, and the challenge is balanced pretty well. Being the lesser version of a later boss that does more or less everything better does bring the illusion down a little, though it's still a fun encounter nonetheless. The best part of this boss to me is coming back to face him again on subsequent playthroughs. The first time you fight Genichiro, you'll likely stand no chance of beating him, despite it technically being possible. When returning to him, he shares the same moveset as the fight at Top Ashna Castle, as you'll now be able to run circles around Genichiro. It's a great touch to show your mastery of the game, and Genichiro's various fights are used throughout to demonstrate this. My biggest gripe with this fight is that defeating him yields you no rewards, and has no impact on the rest of your playthrough. I wasn't sure whether or not to include this boss separately to Ishin, but decided since you can fight him alone in the memories, he should have his own placement. As a standalone boss, he essentially serves to show how far the player has come, since he's now merely a pathetic speed bump before the game's final boss, rather than the huge roadblock he was earlier in the game. He gains a few cool new moves, but nothing to truly spice up the fight, though it's a great template that naturally shouldn't be difficult since it's attached to one of the hardest bosses of any video game. I don't want to go into too much detail here, since the normal version of Ishin will be much higher on this list, but Inner Ishin is lower due to the same reasons as Inner Genichiro, being much less of a threat after you've struggled through the immense challenge of normal Ishin. He's higher than Genichiro's inner variant, since Ishin is a fight which I enjoy significantly more, so naturally do really enjoy this form too, but I would much rather just fight the standard Ishin. I did no-hit this boss though, that was pretty fun. Lady Butterfly is a little hard to place, but she can serve a similar purpose as Genichiro, though she isn't as fine-tuned for this role, and as such falls a little short. Despite this, her quality is consistent with Sekiro's high standard of refined combat, and she poses a formidable early game challenge. I think the reason she isn't held in high regard by Sekiro players is due to her placement in the game, with all the bosses surrounding her leaving much more of a mark on the experience. Her design is fitting, but not standout, so it really does come down to the combat of the fight to carry it, which it thankfully does really well, but since that is the primary appeal of the fight, I don't think it deserves a higher spot. When I initially played Sekiro, I actually preferred the false corrupted monk to this version, but on subsequent playthroughs I've drastically changed my outlook. It really is just an improvement on the earlier fight, bearing the same moveset in Phase 1 with a much cooler arena, one of my favourites in all of Souls. Phase 2 is okay, but I don't find running from the shadows to be particularly enjoyable, so I typically use the death blow from the tree. Phase 3 is just a souped up version of Phase 1, with a variety of new elements and attacks which spice up the encounter and make it truly distinct from the false monk. This boss really shows how much more effective the reuse of bosses is in Sekiro in comparison to the rest of the Souls series.
You unkindled are all the same. You watch my videos every week, yet never once do you take your blaze to that subscribe button. You are content to let me rot atop this mountain of unclicked buttons, to let me suffer for eternity to come until every boss has been ranked from worst to best. I did not wish for it to end this way. Why couldn't you have simply subscribed?
This placement is evidence of just how high FromSoft's standard of boss quality is. The entire good tier is packed with bosses that in any other game would be top of the list, and Demon of Hatred is definitely one such boss. While I initially didn't gel with this boss due to how far it deviated from Sekiro's traditional approach to combat, I've come to appreciate the variety it provides, and the immense challenge the boss can pose. This is helped by its incredible design and lore, which is definitely some of my favourite in Sekiro. This boss is only this low since I'm so connected to Sekiro's classic approach to combat, in fights such as Ishin and Genichiro. The Divine Dragon is perhaps the best presented boss in the series. This fight has already been praised so much for that reason, so I won't labour the point, but this boss is just such an immense spectacle. The first phase is mediocre but inoffensive, but the second phase is a thrilling and beautiful showdown atop the clouds against a fantastical being that is just so vastly different to every other dragon in the series. It's not the most difficult fight by any means, but as I've said countless times before, a Souls boss does not need to be difficult to be an enjoyable encounter. The difference in placement between the Owlfather and the Great Shinobi Owl is astounding. I really like Owlfather and think he's an improvement in every way. While many will have disagreed with my low placement of Shinobi Owl, I'm sure nobody will contest that this is a much better iteration. He has a similar but more varied and complex moveset, and an arena much better suited to his Sword of Compensation. He's also far more visually interesting, and I really like the Spirit Owl shaking up Sekiro's deflect-based method of avoiding attacks. I really do think the arena is the biggest point of praise for this fight, as it takes away so many of my issues with the earlier boss. I can't help but wonder if Owlfather was designed earlier into production than his Shinobi variant, as it certainly feels like a more tightly designed fight. Yobu Oniwa was From Software's first true attempt at a horseback boss, and they did absolutely not miss the mark. His entrance is one of Sekiro's many memorable moments, and the gameplay is in line with the near perfection throughout the game. This is absolutely one of the best first bosses in all of Soulsborne. This is universally renowned as the best variant of Owl. It takes all the incredible aspects of the Owlfather and improves on them in every way. It really is as simple as just being a much better version of the prior fight at Hirata Estate, which is why being a father is much higher on the list. Ishin Ashina is such a tightly woven mechanical challenge, and has visuals to back it up. This will likely be the second variant of Ishin most players fight, and while I don't think he's quite as good as the Sword Saint, it's still undeniably a really well designed boss. I also appreciate how he uses attacks that feature in his later form, a nice touch that ties the different fights together. The only issue I have with this fight is that sometimes I find the lingering hitboxes a little too punishing, but I'll admit it's mostly a skill issue on my part, and I do think it was a necessary touch. Even though he's not my favourite boss in Sekiro, Fire Ishin is absolutely one of the series' landmark achievements in boss design. I'm sure Emma is a boss that will often be overlooked due to being very easy in comparison to the rest of Sekiro's challenging boss roster. I've stated multiple times on this channel that I won't ignore a boss just because it's easy, and Emma is one of my favourites in the series. Her elegant and refined movements, incredible design and fluid combat create a really engaging encounter, which is amplified so much further by the player's own connection to her. Emma is actually my favourite FromSoft maiden, largely due to this fight, and the brutal cutscene following is utterly gut-wrenching. I'll admit that she's not the most intense or invigorating battle in the series, and I may be a little biased, but I truly believe Emma deserves her high spot on this list. Genichiro is the defining boss of Sekiro for me. He's a near flawless encounter that highlights the quality of Sekiro's one-on-one combat. I'm not a huge fan of the bow, but that doesn't take away from the fact that Genichiro is absolutely the best teaching tool in all of Souls, as well as being a nail-biting challenge with near unrivaled combat and great presentation. The only thing holding Genichiro back from the higher spots is that he doesn't have the spectacle of bosses above him, but FromSoft sets a high bar with the absolutely incredible fights at the very top of this list. Sword Saint Ishin is the best boss in Sekiro and the best final boss in the series. He's a nearly flawless encounter in terms of his combat, and his presentation isn't far off. The arena is incredible, reminiscent of Gehrman's, and gets even better with the lightning in Phase 3. This is one of the hardest bosses in the series, held in all of gaming, having 4 whole phases, with the 3 after Genichiro all being more challenging than anything in the game before them. Prior to Elden Ring, I would have said Ishin is the hardest boss in Soulsborne. I do like the brief fight with Genichiro to kick off the fight, as it creates a nice circular structure that demonstrates the player's growth and skill throughout the game. I honestly have nothing bad to say about his moveset. It really is perfect. Sekiro makes a battle like this possible thanks to the greatest video game combat ever made. My only minor issue with this fight is that the player can fall off the cliff to their death, and I never enjoy when gravity becomes the primary threat in these games. Blighttown, the Gutter, and the Depraved Chasm are all examples of gravity just sucking the fun out of an experience. Thankfully in Ishin's encounter it was very avoidable, and leaves a barely noticeable stain on a pretty much perfect boss. So there you have it, the bosses of Sekiro Shadows Die Twice ranked by their quality. Aside from a couple of blotches, this is an incredible selection of adversaries and rivals that of even Dark Souls 3, but I'd love to know what you all think in the comments below, as long as you keep it respectful. All I'm doing is sharing my opinion on a subjective medium, and that opinion is not superior to anyone else's, nor is anyone else's superior to my own. I hope you'll leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and suggest you join me next time for my ranking of Elden Ring's bosses.